Welcome, listeners, to another episode of our Allies podcast. This time, we've got the whole group together.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
All right, so does anyone want to explain what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, sure, I can. So earlier in our podcast series, we explained that we have conducted a survey on some of our middle school students, and we basically are just gonna take a look at the responses and just kind of talk about them in depth.
Exactly. The reason we created this survey in the first place is because we wanted to gather some data and information for this very podcast, as well as create a separate project for our group that our group has been working on.
Right, but that is a little bit of a spoiler, so we won't talk about that too much yet.
Okay, so for now, we'll just stick to the survey. So first, I think we should talk about some of the questions we asked and why we asked them. So I'll just go into and then we'll just go into the actual responses after that. So first question, do you or anyone you know identify as queer, basically not straight or heterosexual, non-binary or not part of the gender spectrum, or a person of color?
So we basically wanted to ask this question to kind of gauge an understanding of how many students were part of these communities or minority groups, so that we could really understand who our project would be affecting and how many people it would be affecting.
Yeah, basically just how diverse Fallon as a whole is and how much big our audience is.
Yeah, exactly. Another question we asked was how accepting people think they are towards these minority groups and how educated they are.
So I think the responses on these questions really surprised me, because if we take a look at the statistics for the that second question there on how accepting students think they are, 32 out of 47 people said that they are like 100% accepting towards this community. And then we looked at the statistics for how well people think they're educated. We kind of had a pretty good range, actually. I wasn't too surprised with the results. I think it's kind of what we suspected. I guess the highest number from one scale 1 to 10 was 8. So a lot of people thought that they're kind of accepting, and then there's only 7 people who thought that they're 100% accepting. And then Anishka, did you want to kind of elaborate on that and kind of just compare the two?
Basically these responses really helped us, figure out people's attitudes towards these topics and really how beneficial our project would be. As you said, Shipra, there were a lot more people who were in kind of like the 7 to 8 range of educatedness, meaning that, there are a lot of people who aren't like 100% educated on these topics, which means that our project and like this very podcast would be pretty beneficial for students because then they'd actually be a bit more educated, which they admitted that they need that little bit of education.
And what's really cool.
Sorry, could I interject for?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say what I thought was interesting from this is that not only did we get a lot of people, we got a lot of diversity at Fallon, but we also had a lot of people who were accepting but weren't really sure about the topic, and that was just really cool to see how people didn't really that although they didn't understand it or maybe they didn't know much about it, they still were like, hey, you guys are pretty chill and deserve rights, and I'm with you, and that was really heartwarming to see.
Yeah, I agree. It's really nice to see that people were accepting despite not really being educated on these topics, which is very nice of like the students at this school.
I think now that we've kind of gone over our main questions, why don't we take a look at our last question, which was all about the optional question and people's final thoughts. So why don't who wants to begin with that?
There were like some there was very a lot of good feedback for the optional question with people inputting on their experiences with being a part of the LGBTQ plus community. And there's like this one negative comment that was very, like just shows that we need to be more educated towards these types of groups and these types of topics, because of this like the response was very not very nice to see or look at.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
feel like this just kind of ties into the fact that we made the survey anonymous, so this person really did think that they would get away with it.
So yeah, lots of slurs, which is not acceptable in any form or shape, especially in this time, which even if it's just one person can still harm many people in who knows how many ways, knowing how big the internet is. And just that there's a person who would say this kind of stuff in Fallon is just, there still needs to be some work to do.
Maybe let's actually take a look at another response. This person said, people make gay jokes a lot and it's really sad. And I think I pretty much agree with it. As a group, we've really talked about things like this, where, we've had annoying and frustrating comments about our races and cultures, and it can be pretty harmful to people. And I feel like people don't really know the meaning to these words and they're just kind of throwing it up in the air. Manhill, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, it's honestly really harmful and stigmatizing to stereotype one person or one culture to all these standards when really they're all a mix of things. And it even happens with lots of religions as well. Especially Muslims being called terrorists and all sorts of things, which are very much so untrue. And it just goes to show that I think Nadine was saying as well, we need to work a lot more on acceptance and Fallon in general, but especially for people in the LGBTQ plus community that because these kind of jokes are being made.
Yeah, basically, I would just want to elaborate on Manhill's last point. She said, like, the LGBTQ community needs to be included in a lot more of these things. Just like schools, we're taught about Romeo and Juliet and like that, a lot of heteronormative romances. And I think that just to let people be like, oh, well, like that's kind of cool. There's like a gay romance they're elaborating on in literature. Like, I think there should be a lot more LGBTQ inclusion in a lot of our literature curriculums if we're ever talking about like romances or something like that. Because there's still like many instances of like them out there. But overall, I think minority inclusion and like telling about their experiences in literature is definitely something Fallon has been like sort of adequate, because like we've seen many stories about different minorities in the past. So I think that's where we need to improve on.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I'd like to move on to another couple of responses that we got from the optional question. And one of them stated, in terms of LGBTQ plus, I think that educating people about it in school will help a lot. Many kids have unsupportive parents. The least we can do is make them feel safe at school. And another response that we saw was kind of added on to this, where they're talking about their experience with coming out to their parents, which was their experience was pretty scary, as they told their parents, and their response is pretty negative. Like, their parents had told them they needed help and stuff, which seems very scary to be in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, our goal, what we're trying to do here is, help students become educated about this type of stuff. And, we want students to feel safe at school. And I think that's very important for us to do.
Right. I think those two comments kind of go hand in hand because it kind of proves that yes, there are unsupportive parents and family figures out there, and in these cases, school would be a safe place for these individuals, rather than you know at, like their homes or anywhere else in their personal life. So, and one way we can make school safer is if we're more educating and accepting of different races and identities.
Yeah.
Sophia, oh wait, you can go.
Okay. But I would just like to like add on a little bit of one more idea. Like, yeah, there's many traditional households or like traditional ideas, and like America, especially like being such a diverse country. I think it's not really our job to change the opinions of all those old ideas around us, but like we want to give kids a chance at school to like form their own opinions instead of just being influenced by old ones, but just forming their own opinions around a topic. So they'll feel like, oh, it's safe to do this. Oh, it's safe to support that.
Yeah, I really agree with you, Emma, there. I think you made a really good point. We can't really change the ideas of the past much because they are influenced by people's upbringings or ways of life from the past. But we can affect the future and we can give people of this generation a new kind of upbringing or education that affects their opinions to be more supportive and inclusive and accepting of these minority groups. So I think that's what's great about our project because we are trying to accomplish this. So another response we got are two responses that are actually pretty similar. We're basically talking about how they think that uh, like promoting acceptance of the LGBTQ plus community is a great idea, and just letting students know that everyone is equal and that we should treat them that way um, is what we should be doing. But they don't necessarily think that we should incorporate more education in school because it might be hard to talk about these kinds of topics and it could create like unnecessary confusion. So, what do you guys think about that?
That person does raise a good point in that it kind of is a very difficult, not difficult, but a hard subject to talk about and like capture all of the ideas and um, things behind it. But I think it is important to just introduce the idea that being gay is normal and it shouldn't be like something that you should be ashamed of or something that is weird or like outside of uh, the normal way, I guess.
Yeah, and obviously we don't want, students feel pressured to coming out. But I mean, if we can, help normalize the idea that it's okay, then that'd be perfect.
Yeah, education is kind of like a sort of difficult topic to explain as well because part of promoting and normalizing is just acknowledging that it's there, and part of that is explaining that to an audience. So that kind of is an education. So at the same time, we're mostly on the promoting and normalizing side though.
Yeah, and kind of adding on to what Shipper said earlier about pressuring people to come out, there was one response we got where they were open to including more education at school. However, they said uh, not so much where students feel pressured to be out to everyone. And I totally agree with that. What we're trying to do is not make people come out. Obviously, we are hoping to kind of like make society a safer place for people who do want to come out, but that doesn't mean we want everyone to come out. We just want people to be comfortable with themselves and be able to express themselves however they feel like, whether that means letting people know how they identify as or just keeping it to themselves. But it's obviously just about making people feel comfortable and letting people know that what they feel or how they identify is totally okay.
Yeah, totally. It's just, it's not, I mean, is about like being true to yourself as well. And it's not just also about the LGBTQ plus community, but also like if you're a person of color and just feeling comfortable with yourself.
Yeah, I think you guys raised some really great points. Sophia, would you like to say something?
Yep. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this episode, even though at times it may have gone hard to hear. We really appreciate you sticking around until now. Next episode, we will be concluding our podcast series. Stay tuned for the final episode. We'll hope to see you join next time. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.